Hey guys, and welcome to my channel. This channel is brand new, so if by the end of the video I've offered you any value at all, please subscribe and like for the YouTube algorithm. In today's episode I'll be talking about travelling. I'll be going over some of the possible reasons you might want to avoid travelling, and then I will be discussing how to go about travelling in a way that you can get the most out of it. And hopefully it will give you a clearer picture if you are planning on going travelling, whether or not you want to. So I recently embarked on a journey to Southeast Asia, and I got back and I had this feeling of dread, existential crisis. And if any of you have ever gone travelling before, I'm sure you felt the same way. Coming back to rainy England, I had this immediate feeling of, I want to get back out there, I want to plan my next journey, I want to go to South America. And I came across this article by The New Yorker, and it was called The Case Against Travel. And I was curious, I was really for going travelling, I was really pro-travelling. And then I read this article and I realised that, travelling didn't actually solve any of my problems. So I did a bit more research, and essentially what the article was saying was that when you're travelling, you carry yourself with you. And so I'm going to explain why travelling isn't necessarily solving your problems. It's not a solution to your problems. And in the second part of the video, I'll kind of go over some of the ways we can mitigate that and my thoughts on whether travelling is actually worth it. Going back in time, 2,000 years ago, people were actually travelling at this point. They were going for leisure, it was seen as a luxury, and obviously airfare didn't exist, so people had to get boats. And obviously it was a much bigger investment to go travelling back in those days. And so it was reserved for the well-off, the elites, but it was still done back then. In Emerson's critique, Ralph Waldo Emerson, he said that travel is bringing ruins to ruins. He calls travelling a fool's paradise. And Socrates said, when you carry yourself with you, you are saddled with the thing that drove you away. And the Stoics were actually quite skeptical of travelling. While they weren't completely opposed to it. But the reason for this was that they knew all too well that having a good life in general, starts from within. And that most people who went travelling didn't go for noble reasons. That was one of their arguments, is that they didn't go to learn, to grow as a person. They did it purely for selfish reasons, purely to get away, to escape their current reality. They weren't challenging themselves. And so the Stoic response to travelling is like their response to anything. Why? They asked the question of why. Why do you want to go travelling in the first place? And I think that's a really key question to answer. Seneca also had a great line about travelling. He said that they go from resort to resort and climate to climate. They make one journey after another and change spectacle for spectacle. Lucretius, a Roman poet and philosopher, says, thus each man flees himself, but to what end if he does not escape himself? He pursues and dogs himself as his own most tedious companion. And so we must realise that our difficulty is not the fault of the places, but of ourselves. And he would go on to write to a friend in a letter titled On Travel as a Cure for Discontent. Socrates said, why do you wonder that globe-trotting does not help you, seeing that you always take yourself with you? The reason which set you wondering is ever at your heels. What pleasure is there in seeing new lands, or in surveying cities and spots of interest? All your bustle is useless. Do you ask why such flight does not help you? It is because you flee along with yourself. You must lay aside the burdens of the mind. Until you do this, no place will satisfy you. So the core argument that the Stoics made, that there's no actual inherent value to travel itself. You don't get a prize at the end, you don't get any rewards, and when you come back, essentially you come back to all your problems, and yes, you had some experiences, but you're stuck with what you left with. They err with this caution, the philosophers, the Stoics, because they know one thing, that, everything starts from within. And I think this is right to an extent, but I want to kind of challenge this theory. And so I'm going to try and answer the question, is traveling actually worth it for you? Personally, I've always believed in travel. I am a bit biased, so I do believe that the pros outweigh the cons. And there are many reasons people cite when they, go traveling as reasons. They might not know what to do for their career, they might not have any plans, and so traveling is a good way to make up for that time, learn new things, gain new experiences, have fun, make new friends, etc. But there are also valid concerns about, whether or not travel is bad for your career, relationships, finances, and traveling definitely isn't for everyone. Some people might prefer a quieter life at home, where they're already content with a routine, a daily routine. And that's absolutely fine. Travel isn't for everyone. And the reason that this is actually a good thing is because all dissatisfaction and unhappiness comes from a sense of lack. And I think that's true. If you're happy with what you've got, then there is no real need to go and explore the world. Even though I do think it can have many, many, many benefits if you do actually go and explore the world. But if you're already content, is there actually any need to do that? I think in the modern world, times have changed. And I think this because we're in a different world where everything is digital, everyone's online, the internet is all consuming. And so chances are you aren't as content or happy as you could be. And if this is you, you might want to consider traveling. I think travel is more valuable than ever before. And my reasons are as follows. The digital world is all consuming. We are always online, we're constantly on our phones, on a computer. And so what traveling allows you to do, it allows you to break out of those cycles of addiction and actually forces you into dealing with challenges and meeting new people and getting outside to make use of your time. And this forces you away from the negative cycles of addiction that we find ourselves in. As such, I think that the kind of argument that your burdens always stay with you, I think is somewhat overstated, to be honest. Because when you're traveling, you're able to spend time that, doing activities that actually enrich your life a lot more. You're doing things day to day, you're getting outside, you're getting sunlight, you're being in nature, and you're actually socializing face to face. And yes, you still have your phone, but this really forces you out, outside of your comfort zone. Real world relationships have become much more difficult in a post-COVID world. And so getting outside and meeting real people in the real world is going to be extremely beneficial. And you have to consider that there are other people like you who want to do the same things, and you can absolutely break out of negative cycles, and that will lead you to give you a greater perspective on life. Secondly, there were a lot more net negatives when you went travelling 100 or more years ago. Airfare didn't exist. You couldn't even get flights, which meant that, it was much more of an investment to go travelling, much more time consuming. And even 50 years ago, flights weren't affordable. And so just having, cheap flights, cheap affordable flights to anywhere in the world is definitely a privilege and a luxury, and it should be taken advantage of, guys. Another thing that's different is just the general safety has improved a lot. Economic security has improved. There's connectivity in these places now. There are vaccines that allow you to get inoculated, prevent you from getting diseases. And because of the much higher levels of economic development, there are less risks involved when you go traveling. You don't need to lose contact with friends and relatives. You can stay in contact, and it's so much easier now with the internet. Almost too easy, I would say. You can book hostels, find places to live, and you know that they're going to be good because of reviews. You can find places to eat and drink very easily. You can book public transport at the touch of a button online. And it just makes traveling so much more convenient, so much more stress-free, and much more worth it, in my opinion. And thirdly, there's a lot more dogma, and there's a lot more stigma, and there's a lot of pressure from people who say that travel might be bad for your career. Now, I say to this, if you're only focused on money, then travel might not be for you. If you're money driven, this might set you back, because traveling obviously requires money. However, gone are the times where it's essential to work from 18 till your death. There are flexible options now. People are self-employed, people are working less hours. You can take 6 months off and you'll be absolutely fine. Yes, you might have to make sacrifices, you might have to live on a few sofas, you might have to move back with your parents, but in general, you're going to be fine. Travel can actually open your eyes to life-changing possibilities, friends for life. It can really dramatically improve your outlook on the world, enrich you culturally, and give you a deeper appreciation for nature. It can give you more self-confidence, because you're outside of your comfort zone, you're forced to socialize and meet new people. So it's definitely not the end of the world if you take 6 months off to go traveling. Times are changing, companies are becoming more progressive in this regard. And so if it's a good employer, they'll likely recognize this and, be accepting of this. So, to summarize, the personal development gains from traveling are pretty big. Having gone to Southeast Asia for 4 months, I definitely think it's worth it. However, there are a few caveats. There are 6 things I think you need to keep in mind before you set off. Firstly, is you need to be really intentional about why you're going traveling in the first place. You need to ask yourself, why am I trying to get away? Is it because I'm trying to escape something? There are plenty of valid reasons for this, but don't expect your life to dramatically change as a result of going traveling, because it probably won't. My philosophy around this is you want to be hoping for the best, but planning for and expecting the worst. That means you don't have any expectations going in. You take each day as it comes and keep an open mind. Positive open-mindedness. Now, if you go into a football game with a bad attitude, you're more than likely to have a bad performance during that game. And it's the same when you're doing anything. So manage your expectations and try to monitor and go in with a positive attitude, because your attitude will likely determine how much you'll get out of the trip in total. Be realistic. There are going to be ups and downs, and that's very normal. And, you know, it will be challenging at some points, but that's all part of the journey. A few of the things that can happen are you might get lonely, anxious at times, and you might feel lost. You might feel like you're going nowhere. But that's all part of the experience. You've got to go through those and get through them. And on the other side of that, there's going to be some amazing experiences. You might have the best time of your life. So don't go in with the expectation that that's going to happen, but be realistic. Number 3 is journaling. Now, I started journaling when I went to Southeast Asia for the first time, and it definitely is the best thing I ever did. The reason journaling is so good is because it's a way of keeping track of those memories and any thoughts and feelings that come into your head. And it serves as quite a therapeutic practice if you implement it into daily life. Most of your life will actually be forgotten. So anything that you can, write down, and, the small moments that you experience that you probably will forget in a few years' time, you can be reminded of those memories later down the line. And so it will definitely enrich your life by writing down those experiences, those feelings, those thoughts, the people you met along the way. Everyone has a different style when it comes to backpacking, and personally I like to keep things very open. I tend not to plan. I book things maximum a week in advance, and this is because when I'm traveling, when you're traveling, anything can happen. You can meet new people, and for example, you could bump into someone, you could get along with them really well, and they say, "Oh, do you want to come here with me?" And if you've already planned something, you've already booked your transport, you can't be as spontaneous, and you can't say, "Let's do something together." And you could potentially miss out on a lot of experiences that you could have otherwise had. I met some amazing people while I was out in Southeast Asia, and I'm definitely thankful that I didn't book anything too far in advance, and I kept my travel plans open, and I've actually made some friends who I'll stay in contact for the rest of my life, so I'm very grateful for that. And that leads me on to my next point. So you don't want to overplan, but you do want to have a general budget and timeline before you set off. This is really important because it will determine how much value you get out of the trip. To an extent, you need a certain amount, obviously, to survive, to live, to eat well, to try new things. And if you don't have enough over that specific time span, and you don't plan out your budget well enough, you know, that might leave you feeling uncertain. It might even be the end of your trip if you overspend. And you want to actually enjoy the experience of traveling. You don't want to just go for no reason. You want to, you know, make sure you have peace of mind when it comes to money. But the good news is you probably need less than you think, because a lot of the countries, especially in Southeast Asia, they do have a very low cost of living, and there are ways of saving money and being effective with your budgeting. There are strategies that I'll probably cover in another video if you're interested. But the general principle is start with how much you have in terms of budget and work out the average cost of living where you're visiting, and obviously factor in transport. But I worked out from my budget that I could roughly spend around £40 a day, and that was enough to cover hotels, hostels, food and any activities and transport while I was out there. So just to get a rough estimate of how much you need, because then that will be an important guideline for when you're out there. And finally, make sure you just have some basic common sense and be self-aware, essentially. For the most part, if you just aware of your surroundings, you'll be fine. You know, be careful with criminals, pickpockets, petty theft, and, you know, keep your valuables in the safe when you're at the hostel. And make sure your money is safely stashed away, and you don't, you know, wear too many valuable items or carry around too many valuables with you while you're traveling. And don't get sucked into spending all your money on, you know, alcohol and drugs. There are a lot of drugs out there in Southeast Asia, and a lot of fake drugs. So be really careful with how much you're spending, because likelihood is if you're drinking every day, it's actually going to make your experience a lot worse in some ways. So keep in moderation. Obviously it's always good to have fun, go out, but try not to waste too much money on alcohol, because the experiences that you'll remember the most are the ones that, you know, the activities that you're going to be participating in. So, to recap, traveling is certainly a way of escaping your mundane existence back at home. It's a way of escaping your job. It's a way of enriching your life, getting more value. It can be a way of escaping relationships. It can even be a way of escaping the bad weather and the climate, and I definitely did that as well. But it can also be much more impactful than that. It can develop your character, and it can give you perspective on your life that you wouldn't get at home, because you break free of negative cycles. So use traveling as a way to reflect on your life and give yourself perspective on the things that matter, and also use it to introspect. Travel can lead you to question your life and lead you to existential dread, fears. But if you consider the points I've mentioned, the doubts can definitely be mitigated, and hopefully you'll be able to make the most out of it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, if I've missed anything, and if you have any topics you'd like me to cover in future videos. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, please give us a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.